was still laughing when I looked at the bank app and saw the balance. 0. My brother and his wife had walked out of that family reunion with every dollar I had worked for, and when I confronted them in the driveway, they just smirked like I was a fool who deserved it. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I simply stood there with my phone in my hand, staring at the empty account, while my brother leaned against his car and said, "Guess you shouldn't have trusted family with your secrets." Secrets. The only secret was that I had been saving for years, quietly putting away money to finally buy my own place, to step out of the cycle of borrowing and begging that had defined our family dynamics since childhood. And he knew it. He had seen me skip dinners out, decline vacations, and work extra shifts just to get closer to that dream. Yet, somehow, it was all a joke to him. The worst part? The reunion had been my idea. I thought maybe we could heal old wounds, bring cousins and uncles and everyone together for one night to laugh, share food, and remember what family used to mean before greed rotted it from the inside. But that night turned into a setup, and I was the target. When I realized what they had done, I remembered every smaller theft, every manipulation, every time my brother had smiled his way out of accountability. Suddenly, it all added up. This wasn't just money, this was a lifetime of him taking and me covering the damage. But I didn't yell. I didn't fight him there, in front of everyone. I knew better. Revenge wasn't loud. It was quiet, precise, and it left no doubt who had won. And as his wife got into the passenger seat, still laughing, I made a decision that would change everything for both of them. I grew up being told that family meant loyalty, that blood was thicker than water, and that we should always forgive each other no matter what. But when I think back, those words were only ever used as weapons against me. My brother Daniel was the golden child from the very beginning. He could do no wrong, even when he did. When he crashed my dad's car at 17, it was written off as a learning experience. When he dropped out of college after blowing through, his tuition money my parents scraped together more so he could find his path. Meanwhile, when I got into a good school on scholarships, worked 3 jobs to support myself, and never asked for a penny, all I heard was that I should be more like your brother. He's got a good heart. I swallowed it, year after year, because I believed one day they would see me too, that one day my efforts would mean something. Instead, every milestone of mine became ammunition for his envy. When I finally saved enough for my own car, he borrowed it and racked up parking, tickets I had to pay to keep it from being towed. When I mentioned my savings account once, just casually in a conversation, he latched onto it like a shark that smelled blood in the water. At the family reunion, he played the role of a doting brother, smiling wide and pulling me into group. Pictures. He even made a toast, telling everyone how proud he was of me. I remember sitting there, a little suspicious because compliments from him never came without a price. Hours later, as people were dancing and kids were running through the yard, I slipped into the kitchen to grab water and saw him and his wife huddled over her phone. She glanced at me, then quickly turned the screen away. But not before I caught a glimpse of my bank's logo. My chest tightened, but I told myself I was imagining it, that maybe I was just paranoid after years of mistrust. I wanted to believe he wouldn't go that far. Yet, when the night ended and I checked my account, reality hit. My entire life savings, years of careful work, had been wired out in a single transfer. The name attached to it? My brother's wife. And they had the audacity to laugh, right there in front of me, like my devastation was the punchline of a joke only they understood. That was the moment I decided I wasn't just going to take it back. I was going to make sure they learned what it meant to steal not just money, but someone's future. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed with the curtains drawn, the glow of my laptop illuminating the room, scrolling through every transaction, every login, every notification I had missed while playing hostess at that reunion. My brother and his wife had planned it perfectly. The transfer had gone through at 8:47 p.m., right when he pulled me outside to take a siblings photo for Mom's scrapbook. While I smiled stiffly for the camera, his wife had been inside, logged into my account, using information she shouldn't have had. But then I remembered something. 2 weeks before, my brother had borrowed my laptop, claiming his phone charger wasn't working and he needed to check his email for work. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now it was obvious. He'd installed something. I dug deeper, checking my saved passwords, my browsing history, my security settings, and sure enough, there was a new extension sitting quietly in my browser, one I had never installed. He had stolen my banking login right under my nose. For a few hours, I sat frozen, debating whether to call the bank, the police, or my parents. But I knew how that would go. The bank would take weeks to investigate, and by then, the money would be gone. The police? My family would close ranks, insisting it was a misunderstanding. And my parents? They'd just beg me not to ruin your brother's marriage. I wasn't about to give them the chance. I took screenshots of everything. The extension, the transfer, the account number it went to. Then I called my bank's fraud department, but instead of reporting it stolen right away, I asked for something else, a freeze on the account. They complied, locking every cent where it was, unable to be withdrawn or moved further. My brother thought he was smart, but all he had done was park the money in a digital vault that I still had keys to. And as I listened to the bank rep confirm the freeze, I felt something I hadn't in years. Control. I wasn't going to scream at him. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to let him walk straight into the trap he had set for himself. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop with texts from my brother. At first, they were smug. "Thanks for the donation, sis." Then mocking, "Guess you'll have to start over. Don't worry, you're good at working like a mule." I didn't reply. I just watched the tone shift over the hours. By noon, the arrogance began to crack. "Hey, weird thing, the money isn't going through. Did you do something?" And then angrier. "What the hell did you do? That's my account." Finally, by evening, he was begging, "Please unlock it. We need it for bills. I'll give you some back. Just don't screw us like this." Every message was another confirmation that my freeze had worked. He hadn't told his wife yet. That much was clear, because she was still posting photos from the reunion, bragging about their perfect night. I smiled, screenshotting each post for later. What he didn't know was that I had already scheduled a fraud claim with the bank for the following morning. By filing with all the evidence I'd collected, the money would be yanked back into my account legally, and his account would be flagged. But that wasn't enough. Not after years of being humiliated, dismissed, and used like their personal safety net. I needed them to feel what I had felt. Cornered, helpless, stripped of dignity. So I took another step. I drafted an email to my parents, attaching every screenshot, every transfer record, every text message he had sent me. I didn't write a single word of explanation, just the evidence. I scheduled it to send at 6 a.m. sharp, knowing my parents would wake up to undeniable proof of what their golden son had done. No excuses. No spin. Just the truth in black and white. And when I finally crawled into bed that night, I wasn't anxious anymore. I was calm. Because for the first time, it wasn't me who had to explain, it was him. At exactly 6:12 a.m., my phone rang. It was my mother. I let it buzz until it stopped, then watched the voicemail notification appear. Her voice was frantic, quivering between disbelief and anger. "Tell me this isn't true. Tell me your brother didn't... Oh God, how could you do this to us?" Not to me, notice. To us. Even when the proof was sitting in her inbox, she still found a way to frame it as my betrayal instead of his crime. 10 minutes later, another call came in, this time from my father. Shorter, sharper. "Take this down. Delete those emails. Families handle things privately. You're humiliating us." I didn't respond to him either. Instead, I pulled up the fraud claim confirmation from my bank. They had reviewed the evidence overnight and reversed the transfer. My account balance, after hours of staring at a devastating zero, now showed every cent back in place. Relief washed through me, but it wasn't the kind that makes you collapse and cry. It was steel settling into my spine. I hadn't just survived this, I had turned the tables. Around noon, I finally heard from Daniel's wife. Her tone was icy, controlled rage wrapped in false politeness. "We need to talk. What you did was unnecessary. You've ruined our relationship with your parents. You made us look like criminals." I almost laughed out loud. "Made you look like criminals? You logged into my account and wired out my money. That's not an appearance, that's a fact." But instead of replying, I let her stew. Silence was more powerful than any argument. And sure enough, later that evening, Daniel himself showed, up at my door. He wasn't laughing anymore. He looked pale, sweat dampening his shirt collar, his confidence gone. He didn't even knock, just banged on the door until I opened it. His first words weren't an apology, they were a demand. Fix this. Right now. I stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, arms crossed, while he tried to tower over me like he always had, but his voice cracked with panic, not authority. "Do you even understand what you've done?" he snapped, his eyes darting everywhere but my face. "The bank flagged my account, froze it completely. We can't even access our checking now. The mortgage payment's due next week. You've put me in a corner." I tilted my head, letting his words hang between us. "No, Daniel," I said quietly. "You put yourself in a corner when you decided stealing from me was easier than earning your own money." His face twisted, the old smirk twitching at the corner of his lips, but it couldn't quite stick. He was unraveling. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It was just money. Family helps family. You'll get it back, but you didn't have to humiliate us in front of Mom and Dad." I almost laughed at that. The gall of him calling me the one humiliating them. "You mean the truth humiliated you?" I asked. His silence was my answer. He shifted his weight, trying to claw back control, then lowered his voice. "You're going to fix this. You're going to tell them you misunderstood, that it was all a mistake. Otherwise—" His threat trailed off, but I didn't need him to finish. I'd heard it all before. The unspoken consequences. The promise of family turning their backs on me. But this time, I wasn't scared. I stepped forward, forcing him back onto the porch, and said evenly, "I don't have to fix anything. You did this, and for once in your life, you're going to face the consequences." Then I shut the door in his face, the sound of the lock clicking louder than any scream. The fallout was swift. By the next day, word had spread beyond my parents. Our aunts, uncles, cousins all knew. Screenshots travel fast, and I had made sure they had everything. My brother's perfect image as the charming, responsible man of the family shattered. Overnight. Cousins who had once defended him suddenly went quiet in the group chat. An uncle who had lent him money in the past sent a scathing message. "So this is what you've been doing with everyone's trust?" Even his wife's side of the family chimed in. Apparently, I wasn't the first victim. Her cousin forwarded me proof of borrowed money that was never returned. It was a pattern, a web of theft dressed up as family obligations. And now, with the bank's fraud department investigating, it wasn't just about reputation. It was legal. Daniel tried to fight it, of course. He called me over and over, leaving messages that swung between begging and fury. "Please, just tell them it was a misunderstanding. They'll press charges. I could lose everything." Then minutes later, "If you think you've won, you haven't. You're destroying this family. They'll never forgive you." But for once, it wasn't me begging to be heard. It was him, and I didn't pick up. My parents showed up at my place that evening, their faces drawn with exhaustion. My mom's eyes were red from crying. "You could have handled this privately," she whispered, like she couldn't even raise her voice against me. "You didn't have to ruin your brother's life." I stared at her, realizing in that moment that no matter what he did, in her eyes he was still the son worth protecting. "He ruined his own life," I said simply. And for the first time, I didn't let their guilt wash over me. I didn't bend. I didn't explain. I just closed the door after they left. And for the first time in years, the silence in my apartment felt like freedom, not isolation. Weeks passed, and the weight shifted completely. Daniel and his wife were drowning under the consequences they thought would never touch them. Their accounts were frozen, the bank was demanding explanations they couldn't provide, and whispers of fraud charges were circling. His job, the one he bragged about constantly, suddenly wasn't so secure when HR caught wind of financial misconduct. Meanwhile, I went to work, paid my bills, and quietly kept saving. For the first time, no one could reach into my pocket or guilt me into giving up what I had earned. But the real revenge wasn't in watching them suffer, it was in the power shift. Suddenly, I wasn't the family's safety net, the one they leaned on and mocked in the same breath. I was the one holding the proof, the one with control. My phone would buzz with messages from relatives. "I can't believe he did this to you. You were right all along." Even my parents, who had spent their lives shielding him, grew cold toward me, not out of anger, but out of shame. They couldn't defend him anymore, and they couldn't face me without remembering how many times they had told me to just let it go. And Daniel, he stopped calling. He stopped showing up. He disappeared into silence. The laughter that once followed him, now replaced with avoidance, excuses, and pitying looks from others. I had thought revenge would feel like fire, like a victory shout. Instead, it felt like clarity, like stepping out of a storm I'd lived in my entire life and realizing the sky had always been bigger than the clouds. The silence lasted months, but I knew better than to believe it was over. My brother had always relied on charm and manipulation to claw his way back, and sure enough, one evening my phone lit up with a long message from him. It wasn't an apology, not really. It was a carefully crafted story about how he and his wife were going through a rough patch, how they had made a mistake, but were still family and deserved another chance. He even tried to appeal to nostalgia, reminding me of childhood memories, of how we used to ride bikes until the streetlights came on, as if those moments could erase the theft of my future. I stared at the words, cold and calculated, designed to reel me back into the role of the forgiving sister. Then, 2 days later, a letter arrived in the mail. This one wasn't from him. It was from an attorney. They were trying to argue that the transfer had been consensual, that I had voluntarily shared access to my finances. My hands trembled as I read it, not from fear but from disbelief. He was actually trying to flip the narrative, to paint me as complicit. What he didn't expect was that I had anticipated every move. I had saved not just screenshots, but also a video recording of my laptop the night I discovered the spyware extension he had installed. It showed timestamps, the unauthorized login, the IP address tied directly to his wife's phone. Evidence so airtight it was impossible to spin. I sent everything to the bank's fraud investigator and copied the attorney on the email. Within a week, the case against me was dropped, and Daniel's attempt to turn the tables only backfired further, strengthening the case against him. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power. For years, he had taken advantage of my silence, my willingness to keep the peace, my fear of being the outcast in a family that had already chosen their favorite. But now, every lie he told crumbled under the weight of proof, and every manipulative move only dragged him deeper. Relatives stopped defending him completely. Invitations to weddings and parties no longer included his name. Even his wife, once so smug and untouchable, began posting cryptic quotes about betrayal and starting over, as if she wasn't the architect of her own downfall. I didn't gloat. I didn't send a triumphant message. I just kept moving forward, building the life they thought they had stolen from me. But deep down, I knew the final blow was yet to come. The one thing he feared more than losing money, more than losing face, losing me entirely, with no chance of ever stepping back into my life, and I was ready to deliver it. The final blow came on a quiet Sunday morning. I drafted one last email, short and simple, and sent it not just to my parents, but to the entire extended family. Effective immediately, I will not be attending family gatherings, lending money, or maintaining contact with Daniel and his wife. This is not anger. It's a boundary. I wish you all well, but I refuse to be anyone's scapegoat or safety net again. That was it. No explanations, no justifications, just a line drawn so clearly that not even Daniel could twist it. Minutes later, my phone lit up with a storm of replies. Some supportive, some shocked, some begging me to reconsider. My parents even called, desperate for me to at least talk it out. But for the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. I didn't cave. I simply turned my phone off, set it face down, and went for a walk in the crisp air of a morning that felt like freedom. Months later, when I closed on the small condo I had dreamed of for years, I stood in the empty living room and let the silence wrap around me like armor. No laughter at my expense, no manipulation humming in the background, just my own space, built with money I had earned, protected, and fought to keep. I thought about Daniel sometimes, about how his laughter had once filled every room, how he always walked away unscathed while I carried the weight. Now, the weight wasn't mine anymore. It was his. My revenge hadn't been loud or dramatic. It had been simple. The truth, boundaries, and finally stepping out of a cycle that had cost me years. And as I set down my keys on the counter of my new home, I whispered to myself words that tasted like victory. Family is not an excuse to be robbed. Family is not an excuse to be broken. And I am not your victim anymore.